Good afternoon. Welcome to the sprint review of Team Argon on this January 31st. So as I was talking about, we're going through the goals and the numbers, which are the story points. And we are going to go through the priorities and the demos of the tickets that we had. So we had the first goal was to increase the documentation iteration, meaning we have added our documentation as part of definition of done for the ticket. And so from now on, we are going to have a ticket created for the documentation specifically, and we are going to track it and make sure we are going to get it done with all the reviews and the PRs and everything. So that was the first goal. Second goal was to finish or drop QCX work. We have been working towards QCX from long time to understand how it is, and if we need to make some design change or anything, or how we're going to implement that. So while we were reviewing all that stuff, all existing code, we found out that we might have to make a lot of design changes, which we didn't want to do. So I think we have dropped that. And anybody want to add anything to that particular goal?
RBAC is role-based access control. So it describes a bunch of work around your primitives to support that stuff in FeatureBase, like the idea of a create user, create role, create group, grant, revoke, the idea of permission, all of that stuff. That's been on the slate for a while, but we've been distracted on various other things that have gotten in the way of getting that done. QCX was the work that Siebes was working on, that we've decided to put a pin in for now, to do with transactional guarantees.
I know that Siebes had done a presentation on the context work that he was doing. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, Pat, maybe can you just share a little bit more detail on like what pausing this or dropping this impacts?
So as time progressed, we discovered this was just becoming an endless, bottomless pit of effort that didn't actually have much net benefit. I think we decided to make the decision to retrench on a little bit. There was no clear shared understanding of exactly what problem we were trying to solve, other than deadlocks are bad, we must not have deadlocks. And then there was a bunch of unanswered questions around, well, what should transactional semantics be? And then there was a whole bunch of discussion around the difference between transactional semantics and just concurrency related things in a distributed system. So we just decided, you know what, spending extra time on this is not going to benefit our customers in the immediate term. Let's put a pin in it and worry about it later. I think we have a clear idea of where we want to get to transactional wise, but it's going to require a bunch of step-by-step work in order to get to where we need it to be. So that's why we decided we've gone far enough on this. Let's leave it for now.
Okay.
Hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay. So we have dropped that particular work for now, and we are working towards the other stuff and make progress on RBAC. So we have started working towards RBAC, but we haven't made a lot of progress towards that because of other higher priority tasks, but we are making progress on that sprint by sprint. And ingest exploration. So we are exploring ingest to determine what are the best practices that we have and how we can implement them. And we're trying to identify what are the performance characteristics of our ingest process. So we are working towards that in sprint. And then we are working towards putting together a content calendar so that we can put our content and we can create blogs and everything out. And so we are working towards that as well. Then moving on about the numbers. So we started a sprint with 47 story points, and we pulled in additional 38 story points while we were working on different stuff. Out of that, 24 are done. And one thing I like to mention that we have completed around like 10 bugs, since we do not story point bugs. So that's like a lot of additional things that we're doing, but we're not story pointing that. And along with that, we have 27 story points which are under review. Like some are documentation pending, some are like some last minute reviews pending. So we have about 50 story points done, including both done and review. And apart from that, we have like 10 to 11 bugs which are completed as part of the sprint. Okay, any question on this number of this sprint, like story points and anything? Okay, moving on, what are the priorities? So upcoming priorities are back. As I mentioned earlier, we're working toward our bag. We have made progress, but we want to make like much more progress. So we're working towards that. And we have to, we're working towards figuring out new board, support board usage. I think you might have seen assist from Andrew, like that's a new tool that is being used that is going to be used to raise the tickets and all the issues. So we are working towards like how to use that and how to create a new support flow to support or work on any of the issues that we identified or customer identified. And kill or finish QCX, since I mentioned earlier, we already dropped that. So we want to make sure that everything we have touched or everything we have so we are documenting everything to make sure whatever we have touched, identified, we are making sure we have all the things under our documentation. And everybody is on the same page, like what was done, what is in this current system, and what is the issues that we have identified. And repo consolidation, so we have completed that, but there are some issues that we are finding in CI and the Sonar Cloud. So we are trying to fix that also, so that we have a similar all the things that were there in the private repo. There was same set of instructions, constraints, or all the Sonar Cloud thing we have on the private one also. Okay. Moving on to the demos. So we have demos about lot of the SQL stuff. So first demo is from Todd on Parquet bulk interest. Let me share that demo. Give me a second, please. Okay.
I added the ability to load Parquet files to the SQL bulk insert command. I also added a simple FeatureBase command to examine Parquet files in order to grab a quick understanding of their contents. This command is called Parquet Info. And as you can see, it displays the schema information, followed by just a brief sample of the contents of the file and the number of rows. Now, in order to load this file into FeatureBase, we enter in the SQL CLI. And we execute this bulk insert command. You'll notice it has the same semantics as it always has. It just has a new format for Parquet file. But one thing that we should note about it, it does download that file and then import it into FeatureBase. It doesn't stream it directly in. And that is this week's feature. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Todd. Any question on this demo or feature?
I was just saying, come on, Sarah, I know you've got questions.
I do. So, I mean, could we go back to and say, yes, we support this, or is there some follow-on work that needs to happen?
So, so potentially, yes. I think this forms part of some of these launch plans that we've been talking about. So we can support the idea that you would have to adopt SQL. Mm-hmm. And so that has its own driving, like we know there's some stuff pent up behind that, like we know there's discussions around data modeling, data types, how to use SQL, blah, 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 all that stuff. But the answer is yes, this works in exactly the same way as what CSV or NDJSON works like. The only difference is we don't yet support the stream data type that we do because Parquet is not a text format. So it sort of cut out for me, but so I don't know whether you heard it. But basically, when you this syntax here that you're looking at on screen presumes that the server has access to the file. In the cloud today, there's the HTTP URL variant. What it actually does is it'll go out to the URL, pull that whole file down to a temp location, and then ingest that. And we still have yet to do some work around getting Parquet to work for the case that Travis showed us this morning with /file to get it to stream it to the cloud.
A month ago, I had no idea when and if we would ever do this, and I cannot believe I'm seeing it just a month later in a demo. Pretty remarkable.
Yeah, this is super exciting.
Okay, thank you. I think that's on the Parquet one, and we have a bunch of, for the SQL, 3 other functions. Pat, I'm going to give you control and you can go ahead and share your screen.
Sure.
Garrett, did you have a question on that while he pulls up his screen? I saw you come off mute.
No, actually, Pat answered my question. I was wondering if
Cool.
It's the same. So for Parquet, we'll just have to load it from a URL, which is fine for now.
So did the definition of done on the documentation stuff, did that go into effect this past sprint? Like, are there docs on Parquet today?
There are
future. Oh, go ahead, Fletcher.
No, sorry, go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, there are, but to your point specifically, Sarah, it's now in effect. So there is a ticket out there for docs on Parquet. So it's go forward and then procedural. But I don't know if that was the same thing you were going to say, Fletcher.
Mostly, there's a documentation update. I'm not sure if it's been merged yet, if Lisa's merged it yet, but there is one for bulk ingest, and it includes examples of Parquet from a file. And going forward, new features that need new documentation, that is part of the DoD, and any documentation changes for changed features. Basically, if there's a documentation update or creation needed, it's going to be part of the DoD. It was not in effect.
Just to add to that, we're in a little bit of a no man's land right now where we're trying to cut over also from the private docs repo to the public one. And I think we also chose to do some other work mixed in with that because of course we did. And so we need to get that merged. Because what I'd like to be able to do is iterate faster on the docs than what we can now, which is what the team are talking about for just focusing on that for next sprint.
Cool. Okay.
Any more questions on that?
I bet a ton of people are going to love it. And for our conversation earlier, like this is a great one to just like make comments here and there and like leak out like we now support Parquet. I bet a ton of customers and folks are going to love this. Good job.
Thank you. Okay. I'm going to go through a list of tickets that I worked on amongst all the other stuff. So the inserts per second counter was not actually registering. In fact, it was writing 0 every time. So now it actually doesn't write 0 every time, and we saw that. We saw that this morning in that dashboard that Jaffe and the folks on Neon showed us. So now this counter does register. The inserts were still happening. It's just it was capturing the number after the batch was consumed. So this one here, show you actually in VS Code, 1888. So let me just go through this demo. So I'm going to create a couple of tables here and insert some data into it so I can demonstrate the joins. And so you'll note here I have a users and an orders table. And in the orders table, I have no order for customer 6. And you'll see why this is important in a minute. So if I do just an inner join, and what is an inner join, Patrick? I would answer that by saying, basically for the matching condition where user ID equals the user's ID match across both tables, give me all the rows that are in both tables. There's another type of join which we now support called left join, which is give me all of the table, all of the rows in the left, even the ones that don't match in the right. So if I run this, instead of an error, now you'll notice that for order ID 6, I get no user ID, which is exactly what you'd expect to happen. And what used to happen was, I think we actually just ignored the left and parsed it as an inner join and then went and ran that. So now we no longer do that. Let me close that so I know that I talked about it. Greg, our ever vigilant tester of all things SQL, noticed that when he was doing some ingest work, when he inserted some data in here that had some timestamps, and then he was trying to do range queries, like less than or equal to, it actually was just returning as though the operator was equals, not less than. So range queries weren't working. And you'll notice here that if I do less than that date and time, and then change that sign to greater than, I will get different rows. So that now works as you would expect it to. And the other one is that min and max didn't work for timestamps either, and now they actually do.
SQL is finding all these little things, like there's like an infinite path of discovering this stuff now.
Yeah, so the good news is it's like some of this stuff is we're finding the edges of all the problems, which is good. Talked about min and max. Okay, the next one is another one that there is a join syntax. Basically, you're going select star from users u, so an aliased users table, comma, and then some other relation, aliased as u2, with a where clause. So in fact, this query is the equivalent of an inner join, and it's an inner join with a subquery. And neither of those two things are working, the inner join part with a comma or the subquery part. And so this now also works as we'd expect it to. There's a couple of interesting things about this one. You'll notice if we look at the plan, it's doing a projection on top of a filter with a nested loops reading from a table scan, which is for the users table. And here it's reading from a subquery, and you'll find basically a whole subquery structure under here. Ideally, what would happen is this, where am I here? This filter expression here would actually be down, would have been pushed down here into the nested loops. And in fact, yeah, there's no constants there, so it needs to be executed every time. So it would have been pushed down here. It's currently, the optimizer is currently not doing that today, but there's a to-do if you go look in planoptimizer.go to actually go do that. It's just not worth the time doing it right now. We're going to make the query work and then move on. Coming back here. Okay. timestamps in CSV were being, so Greg said it was a regression, but in fact, it turns out it wasn't a regression. It had never worked. We just hadn't discovered it. So similar thing here. If in this CSV file there was a date and time, there was some code which would actually dutifully go and parse this out as a correct date and time, and then say, no, I'm just going to set it to 0. So it was basically an else condition that was being fallen through. So this now actually works. So if I was to run this query and you would actually find that instead of the Unix epoch, you'd actually get this date and time, which is exactly what you want. A similar one here with bulk insert. Large numbers from ND-JSON didn't convert to string very well. So you'll notice this number over here. When we read that out of ND-JSON and try and convert it to string, it uses scientific notation. And then we try and do another conversion on it and it would barf. So now it no longer does that. Again, another bulk insert one here. Greg's getting very clever. He's doing a transformation here. So he's concatenating two of the map columns together to create like a composite key, which is exactly the sort of thing you want to do if you have a UID and you want to concatenate it with something else. And then he was trying to, so this part of it worked, the bulk insert part of it worked just fine. But these queries here, where you're trying to do the concatenation inline, and in particular this one here, where it's in the where clause, were not working, and now they correctly execute and produce a result. So this one's probably worth showing. If I do a delete from Greg test here, and I do an insert into Greg test here, you'll now notice that produces no rows, and believe me when I tell you it's supposed to produce no rows, and this one produces rows because it's the not equals and the equals. And the other ones we found is where you had aggregates. So if you were trying to get a count, and we know that that from this first query here returns no rows, so it counted 0, but it was actually counting all the rows, which it shouldn't have been. And then this one actually returns null, which is what you'd also expect it to do. Lastly, we talked about that one. We talked about that one, and we talked about that one. The memory leak. So Jaffe talked a little bit about this. I thought I'd drill into this in a little bit more detail because it was interesting. I think these are in the correct order. So we noticed when we were doing bulk insert, we were using an absolute huge amount of memory. And the reason for that was we have a thing underneath the hood that stores all the requests. And what we're doing is we're doing exactly that, storing all the requests. So every time send us like 5 megabytes of bulk insert, we go store 5 megabytes. Well, actually it was worse than that. It'd be 5 megabytes of SQL for the bulk insert, plus the query plan serialized as a string. So it'd be like 10 megabytes for every request. And do a few thousand of those and memory will add up pretty fast. So what we actually did was I had a first crack at it, and we made it into basically the intention was to make it into a ring buffer. So we only store the last couple of thousand requests, and we also truncate SQL and the plan text to something reasonable like 4K. So that's what this request does. And you see here, if the request list is larger than the number we want to keep, then we delete some stuff and then we do the insert. And then down here you do plan and where you want to truncate it to 4K. The problem, of course, is this doesn't actually stop the memory usage. So Jaffe came back and had a second crack at it to fix all my horrible mistakes, and basically we turned it into a real ring buffer, and you'll see here there's a comment. We remove that line and replaced it with this, which actually stops using the memory. And so we saw that memory usage decreased for a far more reasonable amount after this change, and we could all happily move on with life. So that's all I have to demo for the sprint. Any questions from anybody? Excellent.
Thanks.
Lots of cool stuff coming next sprint, so stay tuned.
Thank you, Pat, for the wonderful demos for all the SQL thing. So I'm going to demo 2 of the tickets that we have done. Let me share my screen. Okay, the first one is character index. Basically, we are trying to find out the index of the character in the given string. So, okay. Okay. So, for example, we have a string. We are trying to find out the position of string is in this string. This is a start. So that's the function that I have written. So it will give you the position of the string in this one, starting positions from 0. So 0, 1, 2. So is starting at this one. Similarly, we can define positions from where to start the search. And let's say, for example, if I say start search from third, so it will start from S, the DHIS. So my output is 5. So because first is not going to be considered because my starting position is third. So that's one function. And second function that I did was replicate, which is basically to replicate a given string with how many numbers we 2 times, 3 times, whatever it is we have defined. So output would be something like that. So these are the 2 functions that I worked on this sprint. I think that's everything for the sprint review today. Any questions? Does anybody want to add anything? Okay, then see you guys next time. Thank you.